Hi and welcome to this video about growth and development, and today we're going to be looking at types of stem cells and growing cells. Now when we look at multicelled organisms, so a multicelled organism is one that's made up of loads of different types of cells. We can organise those cells into structures called tissues, and they're a collection of cells that do a specific job. A load of tissues joined together is called an organ, and a load of organs joined together can be an organ system or make up an organism. Now if we look how we develop into a fully grown organism, the start cell that we all produce from is called a zygote. And when that cell divides via mitosis, it can start to specialise. And once it reaches the 8-cell stage, some of those cells start to begin to specialise, and therefore they start to turn into certain types of cells. And these can be things like brain cells, eye cells, lung cells, or any parts of the body. And what will happen once it reaches that 8-cell stage is some of the genes found within the nucleus of these cells will actually switch off. So if you looked at the genes found within your cells, particularly some of the body cells, then they will have a lot of the genes switched off. Now within certain types of cells, some of the genes will be switched on. And so for instance, if you were looking at this diagram, then you'd see that this gene that controls something to do with nerve expression is switched on within this cell. And so it could turn into a nerve cell. Within the right hand cell, this has got something for epithelial tissue, and so epithelial tissue is found in different parts of the body, and that will have the gene for that switched on. And so in some cells, some of the genes are switched on, and in others they're not. Now a good example of this is if we look at the gene for insulin, and so insulin is a chemical that's used to regulate your blood glucose levels, and so the cells that make it are found within the pancreas, and so the gene for insulin is switched on in the cells in the pancreas. But if you were to look at the cells within the pituitary gland, which is a part of the brain, then the gene for insulin is switched off there. The pituitary gland is actually related to levels of ADH, which is something you learnt about in module B4. And so the gene to make ADH is switched on in the pituitary gland, but obviously the gene for ADH in the pancreatic cells is switched off. Now the cells that we're all produced from, the fertilised egg cell, which is called a zygote, that is completely unspecialised, and so all of the genes found within a zygote are completely switched on, and so everything before the 8-cell stage, so if we flick back to this slide, everything before the 8-cell stage is actually an unspecialised stem cell, and we can refer to those as embryonic stem cells. And why they're so useful is the fact that they can turn into any type of cell, be that a blood, bone, gland or nerve cell, or any cell of the body. And so when the genes turn off, we refer to these types of cells as specialised cells. And so on this slide you can see here that in an embryonic stem cell, if these represent the genes found within those cells, then in embryonic stem cells they're completely switched on. So there's none of the genes switched off, and so that cell has the capability to turn into any type of cell. Now we do have types of stem cells found within adults, and not just in embryonic stages of life. Adult stem cells are partially specialised, so they can't turn into all types of cells because some of the genes, as you can see here, are switched off, but they can turn into some useful types, particularly blood. If you look here at your liver cell and your eye cell, you can see that a lot of the genes are switched off, but obviously there are different genes switched off in the liver cell when you compare that to your eye cells. And so why scientists are so interested in embryonic stem cells is the fact that they can turn into any type of cell. So this gives massive capabilities for the regeneration of tissues that have been damaged. So particularly you could replace an entire organ, or potentially if you've got tissues that are damaged within a person, you could actually turn or regenerate those tissues, particularly when looking at diseases like Parkinson's or Huntington's or even Alzheimer's. And so stem cells are of a particular interest to scientists. Now there are some situations in which we can actually turn normal body cells, so potentially like liver or eye cells, in the right conditions we can actually switch on the genes that were previously switched off, and so we can produce stem cells that could be potentially used for research. Currently our embryonic stem cells can come from fertilised eggs, or we can take them from the umbilical cord post-birth, because obviously that contains a number of these cells.